just getting ahead of the comments. I mispronounce brazier quite a lot. And it just, I pronounce it like another article of clothing, and I'll leave it at that.
Hello! Today we're talking about fantasy fashion. Hello! Today we're talking about fantasy fashion. Man, the amount of times I had broken and then just tried to walk back in to start this. So, what do I mean by fantasy fashion? I do not just mean fictional fashion, but it does also apply to some other sci-fi, but when it's particularly talking about just fantasy, it's talking the implications of magic. So this is kind of split into two categories. First, the generalist. Second, the magical possible. Third, the magical probable. You'll see there's probably maybe names here. So for our first selection, you can do anything. This is more of a short to just get it out of the way, but go crazy, especially when you have different body types for different types of creatures and different amenities to try and think of. Like when it comes to the stereotypical, the common pick, tieflings. You've got horns and a tail to work with. Do they have specific ornamentation for it? Do they have ornamentation that only they can wear? How do they incorporate the tail into the previous bits of clothing? That's a question to bring up to an extent, but then also things like a dwarf and their beard. A stereotype for sure, but do they put ornaments in it? Is it a specific priority or kind of sense of honor or seniority? Do they have ornamentation and rank similar to how we'd put medallions on armor or vest? Would they put it within their beard? Are there really, really crazy elven earrings that we wouldn't even call earrings because they don't hang? They're just like an ornamentation placed on top. And even when it comes to your bog standard humans or generalist stuff almost anyone can wear, there is a sense of practicality, yes, but you're in a fantasy setting. And if you're writing or running it, make up materials or ways of working with materials to allow whatever you want or whatever you think's the most interesting would work really well. And this isn't to say to entirely abandon fashions from reality. No, especially go back and look to some of those for inspiration or little bits and pieces here and there, because a lot of clothing doesn't make sense. Yes, there's the practical, and that normally comes down to undershirts and general pants and clothing and underwear, but a lot of that, how to put it, a lot of clothing just being practical comes to a modern day thing. I mean, heck, this is a t-shirt which is just practical, but it's got a symbol of a game series I like on it. And then a shirt to accent, there's more. But especially the further back you go, there's a lot of different meanings, different types of clothing, jackets, specific parts of it. And not even just meaning, just different styles or likings of the time. Or the culture, it's not even just a time thing. Traditional clothing that you wear in only certain events, are there magical or arcane events that people wear certain things as wards or beliefs to try and ward against evils? Or similar thing with symbols or amulets, are there specific types of clothing or materials that you wear to act as some kind of protection, whether a belief or actually magical? And when it comes to also materials, you could have an entirely new material that you're making clothes out of, or go with similar routes, but then change qualities of it. I mean, a lot of people have a fun favorite of using a different kind of silk, especially spider silk. But then having some kind of different stand-in for cotton, or just a modified version of it, or fantasy version of it, and then things like sheep, rams, hides, hair from other creatures. Not to mention scales. The number of scaled creatures that are just in a fantasy setting just goes up. Is it a sign of nobility that you have a slight bit of dragon scale within a crown of yours, or some kind of fancy tabloid? That's not a word. That's not a clothing word, at least. Oh, God. A fancy cufflink. Cufflink is the word I was looking for, and that's not even up here. Jewelry not made out of just gems and metals, but some of these bits of animal parts, rare things, horns, teeth, like special kind of teeth from a specific creature. So that's more onto the mundane stuff. Now we go into pushing in that same direction, magical. We don't even have to just get into the sense of materials, but materials that act weird, that aren't just now workable or pliable or a bit more common due to it being a fantasy setting, but can defy physics or have some magical effect to them that isn't necessarily a beneficial one. So in fantasy, there's plenty of things like magic items, but usually they're just a sword, fancy or ornamental or not, that has a bonus or armor. What if there's entirely just enchanted sets of clothing just to look cool? And I'm not just talking disguise cloaks, but like, hey, I have a cloak Like the Cloak of Billowing from Xanathar's Guide, which, yeah, just a bonus action. It's always flowing in the wind. Or a hat that for some reason you wanted to talk. Clothes that have a slight additional function of you're always cooled down on the inside of them. Not you're resistant to desert heat, but just you don't sweat. An automatic air-conditioned bit of clothing and temperature control? Yes. That'd be amazing. And who wouldn't make that? Yes, usually in these games and systems, you're an adventurer or a fighter or the big hero of a story, so whenever you pick up an item, it's usually something to help you in that combat sense, or direct whatever the system you're working through is, the adventurer. When it comes to daily life, yes, I'll want clothes that'll just keep me air conditioned to an extent or temperature controlled. Depending on ease of access to magic, you wouldn't need things like furs or worry about too much insulation if you can just have any little bit of clothing give you the equivalent of that insulation. Or things like that disguise cloak, or other kinds of disguise or illusion cloaks, or clothing that can just instantly change. Why not just, if it's easy enough to put stuff magically like that, why not have a simple necklace that projects that entire set of clothing? That's an option, but could be expensive. I know in one of my, there was a player who was in a ball and they were looking around for any kind of illusion or some assassin. And they just ended up seeing a noble that, oh man, in reality was 20 years older and 60 pounds heavier. But with an illusion around him, looked quite a bit fitter. And he wasn't the only one at that ball doing something similar. Imagine, again, it's not, you don't need makeup to be physical if you can just press or drink a single potion. It instantly appears and changes your face a little bit. And especially when it comes to magic, it's not just simply supplementing these things that we already want or are already doing. You could have to do crazy things. What if part of the fashion is just to entirely change your skin color for an evening? Everyone's just the Blue Man Group at a ball. You wear your house colors proudly within your hair. Now I'm thinking of just an all-punk noble family with dyed-colored streaks. Capes, accessories, and jewelry that automatically stay in place, don't get tangled in anything, automatically move out of the way of any of structures they hang on to. You know when you have headphone cords and you're walking around, it hooks onto a handle? Terrible. Jacket doing a similar thing. A scarf just falling off, not being in the proper place. A hat that falls off or gets blown off your head. Being able to have anything to just say that, yeah, no, this hat just never falls off. If in 5e you could have something like an immovable rod, you can have a hat that doesn't fall off. You can go so wild. Particularly in the sense that you can get wild in what a lot of Final Fantasy-esque things. MMO sort of things. The really big, bulky, crazy, ornate armor sort of style. Or just clothing. Do you want an entire church cathedral stained glass window with metal ornamentation at the end of your dress trail? You can have that. Will it need magic? Maybe. Will it need a specific magical material? Probably. Will it need to be in a fancy setting? Yes. Yes. But you can go so crazy. And you don't have to specifically follow just historical norms. They're a great inspiration, especially different regions. Or event clothing. Specific festivals. But you can just go super crazy with what a character can have and wear, especially bringing an ease of magic or just access to it. It can go wild. In some of the best ways. Another example from the setting I run is that a sign that someone might have a Archfey patron is the fact that a lot of their clothing is really fancy and ornamental, but just happens to not get as dirty as it should, or cleans up a little too easy, or just doesn't crease when it should, or fold or buckle or never gets tangled. They have a slight hairband that they put within their braids, and it never comes undone, never dirties, never dusted. A perfume that lasts forever? Yeah, you could do that alchemically, or just through magic, have yourself change your smell. So that's leaning a little bit away from fashion. Kind of. For our third category, and this hat namely, and something I mentioned way back in Spell-A-Day. Right? We're in the practical section. Not just in the sense of practical clothing, which does exist in real life, just clothing practical for the situation or the action that you're about to do. Less for the style, more to try and fulfill the purpose, but can still be stylized. They're still sporting equipment brands. Not just in the sense of quality, but look. Appeal, comfort, other things. So, magic. Going back to those materials for a brief moment, maybe there's a specific, oh no. I'm not going to hear the end of this. So, There's a specific scarf in JoJo made out of material that is to help channel the energy within that setting that is used for a lot of their stance. Or a lot of the weird magic system in that. I haven't watched that much of it. But, okay, now, after thinking of that, a way more classic one is that metal is naturally against magic. Specific metals more so than others, but it's to stop mages from wearing metal armor in generalist fantasy settings, is that it stops you from spellcasting, not just in the sense of physically restraining you, but it's stopping whatever is like flowing or energy is going around. So maybe you have to wear materials and clothing that work with the specific kind of magic you're working with. An example from Warhammer Fantasy is that a Bright Wizard has braziers, or places that they hold candles within their back that's on mounted upon their shoulder. They also have tattoos running down their arms, which are all like bits of runic scrawl to help them control it. But because their magic is influenced and boosted by being around fire, they have braziers physically on them. It serves a practical purpose. And the best place to look at this within 5e, which is the one touchstone from Spell-A-Day, but in other settings as well, components. What are physical things needed for magic, and do you need to hold them in your hand? 5e wise, I say you don't, because some of those materials are fire and smoke. But I get it if some people say you do, especially if it directly calls out its use in the spell, as in the way it's being used. So going through an example of 5e again, a lot of different materials for illusions are just different types of cloth, or materials you'd already wear, whether it be silk, whether it be some kind of just general cotton mix, or another word for a piece of cloth. Whether it be of a certain color, mix of colors, or not, you can have that on your person. Not in the sense that it's likely already on you in the sense of clothing, but you wear specific types of clothing or specific colors of clothing that you can have draped across you that you can use for your spellcraft. A decent amount of spells in 5e require a feather. Most just say a feather. Some have specific demands from specific types of birds. I think, jokingly, the most efficient feather was a sleeping albino hummingbird from a foreign country. This is after checking just all the different material components with feathers that can overlap with each other. I think you cover like 10 spells with that. Back to the fire and smoke, the braziers. That is an honest thing that can work in 5e, or how the Staff of Fire itself has a brazier at the top of it. Have a staff that's a sensor for the smoke. When it comes to holy water, having those bottles draped on you in specific ornamentation, or earrings that have slight holy water bottles at the base of them. You can go the classic amulet, but when it comes to a lot of different clerical or paladin spells, it just says it needs a holy symbol of some kind. Who says you just need that on a necklace? Throw that on everything! Have it branded on a hat, a buckle, your shield, a pauldron, just a bit of your back. Tattoos, maybe. It just says symbol. It doesn't say, ornament. Weapons, shields, put it on different structures and materials. Stepping away from 5e for a bit and going along similar lines with the Warhammer one, with the braziers on the back, if you have other, an ice mage, might be a bit more difficult, but you might permanently live in cold places and try to just have parts of your clothing that you purposely get wet and then freeze to then wear into battle. So you're specifically getting clothing that can absorb and soak up a lot of water, but is still easy enough and fast enough to freeze up and provide enough flexibility for you to move. So maybe it has different metal links or different materials, but it has this large draping cloth or cotton bits of capes that you throw on afterwards. Lightning Mage, lots of copper, and points. Lightning rods. So all of a sudden you just have one with these different bits of copper threading wiring throughout a vest, cloak, or coat of some kind, and a wizard hat. But it specifically goes up to a point and then keeps going with a single copper point and maybe some off their shoulders and especially their staff. Illusion, back to that one with the cloth, just draped in different colors all over the place. Looking closer to some kind of ancient jester. Maybe a defensive mage is always wearing some type of armor. Even if it's not metal, it's a lot of things that are defensive, a bit more sturdier cloaks, padding, leathers. The druid shaman archetype is an easier one to go to because it's nature. They can't wear many things manufactured. Doesn't say they necessarily need to. That's just an easier one a lot of people go to, but instead of it just being, well, they like nature and they have it around, so they wear leaves everywhere, it's with wearing all of this, They are an easier communion with the natural magics of the world. Some kind of stone mage, they just have to have physical stone placed on them somewhere. Like all their jewelry, instead of it being gems and precious metals, it has metals connecting to just hunks of granite. Or specific bits of obsidian taken from a particular mountain. Various bits of scribes or wizards based around information or knowing things. Books, scrolls, pages, just everywhere. Like a small booklet on the top of their hat, pages draping from the sides of it. Or another, which is the, like fate dice. In the sense that using some kind of augury, looking through different dice or thrown bones, having it braided into your hair, extremely long hair so that you can like toss it around and see it, but it's always at hand. Or maybe in the middle of spellcasting, you do just pull your hair in front of you, and whatever your hand gripped in the way it's facing is what it is. Or it's cards that are left like up in a stack tied to strings that then fall down in front of you. Or back to that Fae example, maybe it's based off the different bits of influence, not just in the power you get, but whoever you're getting this power from, or whatever. Like, again, maybe the 5e-esque Draconic Sorcerer, or Dragonborn, or even like Skyrim Dragonborn-esque, shows draconic features. Or just some kind of other presence of it. But that's a bit more physical. Jumping over to the clothing, though, think, as goofy as it is, the dragon siblings from Warhammer 3. When in their human forms, all their clothing still aligns with their designs when in their dragon form. So your gauntlet just seems a bit more pointed at the ends of it, whether it's your choice or not. You're wearing a lot more scales of the ones that you're getting your power from. You have horns displayed on your helm or crown. This idea that imagery in that sense adds this bit of connection or power. Symbols. Just instead of a single rune, it's a style. So next time when your game says that there's a component to a magic item, look for what might just be incorporated into practical clothing for a wizard. It might seem impractical to us, but always having it on you, if you don't need to like draw it out of a bag or try and force it into your hands at some particular moment, if you can get around that by just wearing it, or boosting your magic some way by just wearing it, it's a fun excuse to have crazy looking spellcasters. Thank you to my patrons, and yes, Patreon. And, oh man, 6,000! Wow. Wow, that Lancer video, Horus. Ooh. Well, hope you're having a good day. And if you're not, I hope you do.
Unfortunate.
This is a bad time to say that I'm also just bad at stealth games.
No, I think it's the perfect time.